We're going to go ahead and take a look at inverse trig functions. Whether you say arc sine or inverse sine doesn't make a difference. Either one of these means the exact same thing, but they're only defined in quadrants 1 and 4. In quadrant 1, it's from 0 all the way up to pi over 2. In quadrants 4, it's from 0 backwards to negative pi over 2. In other words, if you had what you thought was an answer of a 7 pi over 4, that would not be correct. Because you got to start at, so if you had what you thought was 7 pi over 4, but remember you got to start here at the origin or at 0 and rotate backwards when you're in the fourth quadrants. So that would be a negative pi over 4 that you would put down for an answer, not a 7 pi over 4. This same idea works when you're dealing with arctangent or tangent inverse, because once again, that's defined in quadrants 1 and 4, from 0 up to positive pi over 2, or from 0 backwards to negative pi over 2. When you're dealing with arc cosine or cosine inverse, or arc cotangent or cosine or cotangent inverse, they're defined in quadrants 1 and 4, from 0 all the way to pi for both one of those. You're going to have to just have memorized which quadrants these inverse trig functions are in. So let's go ahead and evaluate what we have here. Cosine inverse. Cosine inverse is an angle. That means the cosine of what angle is root 2 over 2. And since it's a cosine inverse, you got to limit yourself to quadrants 1 or 2. So it really means cosine of some angle is a root 2 over 2. You could write it like this or think of it in words. Doesn't make a difference. But when you limit yourself to only quadrants 1 and 2, and you think about 1 is cosine equal to root 2 over 2, you just get a pi over 4. That's your answer. That's your angle that's being represented by this statement over here. So you want to think, okay, sine inverse of negative 1/2. That means the sine of what angle is equal to negative 1/2. Remember, sine inverse is defined in quadrants 1 and 4. And remember, if you're in quadrant 4, you got to come down and rotate down from x being 0. So when is sine equal to negative 1/2? And that's at negative pi over 6. Cosine being negative, arc cosine being negative 1 means cosine of what angle is negative 1. Remember, cosine inverse or arc cosine is defined only in quadrants 1 and 2. When is cosine equal to negative 1? And that's at pi. Arc cosine of pi over 2 means the sine of what angle is pi over 2, which really means the sine of some angle is approximately 1.51 something, because pi over 2 is approximately that. Well, you should remember that sine is never going to go above 1 or below negative 1. So will sine of any angle ever be equal to 1.5? No, it will not be. So it's the empty set. Over here on the right, we have an inverse trig function with a normal trig function here. Typically in these types of problems, you're going to want to work from the inside out. So you try to figure out, okay, the inside, tangent of pi over 4. That's one you're supposed to have memorized, and it's this. You now got to ask yourself, okay, that means the tangent of what angle is equal to 1. So tangent of some angle is equal to 1. Remember, tangent inverse is defined in quadrants 1 and 4. You should have that one memorized once again, and you get pi over 4. Once again, you want to work from the inside out. So you work from the inside. That's one you're supposed to have memorized from your unit circle. And you get root 3 over 2. Then you have your outside of sine inverse, the whole inside simplified down to root 3 over 2. Means the sine of one angle is root 3 over 2. So if you wanted to think about it like this in terms of an equation, you could, but you don't have to. You could think of it in words which are written out. But remember, you can only look for an answer in quadrants 1 and 4. So when is sine equal to root 3 over 2? It's another one you're supposed to have memorized, and you get a pi over 3. Your answer will always be in radians unless it specifies otherwise, which I don't think it will. Once again, you want to work from the inside out. The inside means the cosine of what angle is 0. So you think when is cosine equal to 0? And remember, you got to limit yourself to quadrants 1 and 2. When is cosine equal to 0 in quadrants 1 and 2? And that's at pi over 2. Then you just have the tangent of pi over 2. That's another one you're supposed to have memorized. When is tangent equal to pi over 2? It's not. It's at the one spot where it's undefined. Here we have cosine of an arc sine plus a tangent inverse. Remember, your arc sine or your tangent inverse, any arc of a trig function or any inverse trig function always just represents an angle. So this arc sine of 4/5 represents an angle. Sine of some angle, we'll call it A, is really 4 over 5. Well, we could draw ourselves a triangle. Remember, sine inverse is defined in quadrants 1 or 4, and it's positive in quadrant 1. So we're going to draw ourselves a triangle in quadrant 1. Come out from the origin, make a right angle to the x-axis. Remember, sine is opposite of 4 over your hypotenuse. Label that as A. You could remember that it's a 3, 4, 5 right triangle, or use your Pythagorean theorem. Here you have a tangent inverse. Once again, that's an angle. It means tangent of some angle equals 3 over 4. So you got to put yourself in either quadrants 1 or 4. 1 is tangent positive in quadrant 1 again. So you draw yourself a triangle in quadrant 1, coming out from the origin, making a right angle to the x-axis. Remembering that tangent is opposite over adjacent. Labeling your angle as B. Using your Pythagorean theorem, you get your hypotenuse to be 5. So we really have the cosine of this being angle, which we're calling angle A, plus this angle here, which we're calling angle B. So it's really the cosine of two angles added together. We have a formula for that. Cosine of A, cosine of B, plus or minus the sine of A, sine of B. So now we look at this, go cosine of A. So we go to A cosine, 3 over 5. That says cosine of B. So we got to go to B and do our cosine, 4 over 5. Then we have sine of A. So we got to go to A. That's why it's important to have these labeled so you know which triangle to go to. Go to A, take your sine, 4 over 5. Sine of B, so you got to go to B. Sine is 3 over 5. Multiply the first two together. Multiply the last two together. And we got to subtract, and we get 0. So our answer for this whole problem is 0.